In this country, there are long-standing and substantial wealth disparities between families based on race and ethnicity. According to Federal Reserve System data, the average white family has 8 times the wealth of the average Black family. The Black Economic Alliance Group is a coalition of Black business leaders committed to changing that with a focus on work, wages, and wealth. With us today, the executive director of the Black Economic Alliance, or BEA, David Clunie. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Sandra.
So the Alliance focus, work, wages, and wealth. Why does that need so much attention when we're talking about Black people in this country?
So as I think we've talked about more in the last 2 years than we ever had before, Black people have never been full participants in any American institution, particularly our democracy and our economy. So we talk about work and wages as, creating a situation where Black folks have an opportunity to close the gap between where we're overrepresented, which is in low wage, low skill jobs right now, to the growing industries that have been providing wealth for a lot more families outside of the Black community, and as well as paying a living wage, both as components to building wealth. And what everything that BEA does is about creating infrastructure for wealth building at scale for Black Americans. And we do that through public policy advocacy, through political action, and through the work of our foundation, really all of our non-political work, working with the private sector and the nonprofit sector alike.
I know that you guys were created in 2018, and the thought at the time, there wasn't really anybody doing what it is that you do. Why do you think it's taken us so long to I guess, sort of to mount our resources and focus on the thing that's really going to be needed to move the needle in terms of Black families?
So part of it is that BEA represents a unique collection of very professionally successful Black Americans who have come together to use their resources collectively. A lot of the members of the Black Economic Alliance had in their own right been investing in politics, investing in philanthropy and different initiatives to try to build wealth for Black folks. And we're really unhappy with the lack of return on investment individually and particularly collectively. So came together to say we have to be able to do this better together. And in the formation of the Black Economic Alliance a number of years ago, Vernon Jordan, who is a historical figure who we lost recently, unfortunately, said for the first time, we have a critical mass of Black leadership in the corporate sector. And now that we do, we have a responsibility to use those resources collectively to create better opportunities for other Black Americans.
So let's talk about some of the things that you guys are doing specifically, BEA is doing specifically to try to move the needle. The Black Economic Entrepreneurship Fund.
Yeah, the BEA Entrepreneurs Fund is something that was launched last year. We announced with an anchor investment from our partners at Wells Fargo, and they invested a $20 million 5-year investment in what will eventually be a $50 million fund. And really, we're trying to close the gap between the opportunity there is to invest in Black entrepreneurs and the lack of financing that they're able to get from either traditional financing through banks and other traditional financing, or even through venture capital. We know that before 2020, for example, less than 1% of venture capital finance was going to Black founders. And even after the influx of investment in Black entrepreneurs and Black causes in 2020, still only 3% of venture capital finance went to Black founders. So there is just a huge amount of untapped opportunity in investing in Black entrepreneurs. And it really benefits not only Black folks who are trying to build wealth, but it benefits the entire economy.
Yeah, in fact, look, there's a stat I have here, a recent study that systemic racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion over the last 20 years alone. So it's not just Black families losing with these disparities, the country is losing.
That's absolutely right. And that statistic helps undergird really the work that BEA is trying to do, is trying to create a more sustainable, inclusive economy that benefits everyone by closing the gap between Black and white income, wealth building, and really the wealth gap that has held back the entire country.
It benefits, again, everyone. Talk to me a little bit about the partnerships that you have, that BEA has with HBCUs like Spelman and Morehouse.
I appreciate you asking that. So very closely tied to the Bea Entrepreneurs Fund is the Center for Black Entrepreneurship that, again, last year, the Black Economic Alliance Foundation launched at the historic institutions of Morehouse and Spelman colleges, which was very intentional on our part, both to start this program in Atlanta, the second largest concentration of Black people in America, a place where there are over 100,000 Black small businesses. And it's really just been a hub for investment in Black entrepreneurship, Black businesses, and is really the gold standard for Black wealth around the country and what is possible. And some of that goes back to the history of Atlanta with mayors like Maynard Jackson, who made very strong commitments in making sure that resources, public, private, and nonprofit, were being invested in Black wealth building. But also, it's about the role that HBCUs play, historically Black colleges and universities. I am a proud graduate of the Howard University School of Law. My father is a graduate of Hampton University, and these schools have been a driver of social and economic mobility over generations, really since even before slavery was abolished, but especially after the abolition of slavery. And really, our intention in starting this program at Spelman and Morehouse is to create an ecosystem of exposure, opportunity, and ultimately investment in Black entrepreneurs to show the commercial value of how much wealth we can create for everyone by investing in these entrepreneurs that really just have not been exposed to the same opportunities as some of their white counterparts.
I know that BEA believes that it is also really working on the voting rights front. How is that connected to a healthy economy?
I'm glad you asked that question. We are an organization that is, primarily focused in building infrastructure for wealth building, but we know a condition precedent and an absolute prerequisite to a growing economy and full participation for Black Americans in the economy, which we've never had, is full participation in our democracy. And just like we've never had full participation in the American economy, Black folks have also, unfortunately, we weren't even given the right to vote. Black men were given the right to vote with the 15th Amendment, and then Black women came along years later. And since then, there have been targeted efforts throughout the country at making sure that Black people do not have equal access to the polls, or even with things like gerrymandering, making sure that the power of the Black vote has been diluted. And I think we saw in 2020 just the awesome impact of Black voters. If you just take Georgia as an example, to actually change the outcome of an election. And we know that economic power and political power are both important for Black folks to have a seat at the table. There's an old adage, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Black folks have been on the menu and not at the table for the entirety of the American history, the American story and experiment. We are all about showing the commercial value of bringing Black folks to the table and how it benefits everyone for us to have full participation, not only in our economy, but our democracy as well.
And to that extent, have you, I should ask, how have you been able to work with the current Biden administration along these lines?
Very well. We've enjoyed a good relationship with the current administration, and I should say, importantly, BEA is a nonpartisan organization. Mm-hmm. The issues that we work on have to transcend party and have to be baked into the fabric of the American democracy and economy, so that regardless of whoever is in charge in the White House, in leadership in the House, the Senate, or any state house or city council around the country, there is an understanding that it is a net benefit to the U.S. economy, a net benefit to every local economy to have greater and at some point full participation of Black Americans driving and growing and making these economies more sustainable and resilient. So we have enjoyed being able to have a strong voice pushing the Biden administration to do things like create the racial equity pillar of their economic plan on day one of the Biden administration, making a commitment through an executive order to racial equity, but also just having a historic commitment to representation and having a lot of firsts. It's way too late to be having firsts, but we need to start somewhere. And one of a recent success that is not talked about as much as Ketanji Brown Jackson, who we are very proud of to have joining the Supreme Court for the first time ever, finally having a Black woman on the Supreme Court. Also things like, and this goes to our infrastructure point, having Black representation, more Black representation on the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is over 108 years old. There have been almost 100 governors appointed to the Federal Reserve Board in that 108 years, and only 3 of them have been Black. So we were successful pulling together a coalition of Black-led organizations, including the 8 legacy civil rights organizations and newer organizations like BEA, but really led by BEA and some of our partners. We advocated for the net benefit of having people with the lived and professional experience at the table of the 7 Federal Reserve Board governors, understanding what it's like and what it means to have full participation in the U.S. economy, and also just this moment we're in with income inequality and how important that is to fix some of the structural damage for a much more sustainable U.S. economy.
David Clunie, if I send folks to blackeconomicalliance.org, they can find out more about what you do and how they might be able to help, correct?
Absolutely right. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, but blackeconomicalliance.org is the best first one-stop shop to find everything that we're working on. So appreciate it.
Such a pleasure to meet you. And I hope you will come back as we all try to move this needle forward.
We would love to. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.